There was a time when she sat quietly in the kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at a cold cup of tea, wondering how two people who once couldn't sleep without hearing each other's voice had become strangers living under the same roof. Nothing dramatic had happened overnight. No huge betrayal, no sudden ending, just small moments that slowly piled up over months, missed conversations, unanswered emotions. Days where "how was your day" became silence instead of care. They still loved each other, but somewhere between responsibilities, stress, and emotional exhaustion, they stopped understanding each other. In the beginning, their relationship felt effortless. They laughed at stupid things, shared dreams about the future, and made each other feel safe. Even during difficult days, they found comfort in each other's presence. She remembered how he used to notice every little detail about her when she was tired, when something was bothering her, even when her smile was fake, and he remembered how she believed in him during moments when he doubted himself. They weren't perfect, but they were connected in a way that felt rare. But love changes when life becomes heavier. People think heartbreak only comes from cheating or leaving, but sometimes heartbreak happens while two people are still together. It happens when conversations become shorter, when effort becomes one-sided, when emotional closeness slowly disappears without anyone realizing it. He became busy trying to survive the pressure of work and responsibilities. She became tired of begging for emotional attention without wanting to sound needy. Both were hurting, but neither knew how to explain it properly. That's the painful part about relationships. Most people don't wake up one day and decide to stop loving someone. They slowly become emotionally disconnected while pretending everything is fine. One person waits to be understood. The other assumes silence means peace, and over time, the distance grows so naturally. Both people forget how close they once were. There were nights she wanted to tell him how lonely she felt even while lying beside him, but her pride stopped her. She was scared that if she explained her pain and he still didn't understand, it would hurt even more. So instead, she stayed quiet and acted strong. Meanwhile, he noticed she was changing too. She laughed less. She stopped sharing random stories about her day. Her eyes no longer looked at him the same way. But instead of asking deeper questions, he convinced himself she was simply overthinking. The truth is, relationships rarely collapse because of one big moment. They collapse because of emotional neglect repeated in small ways every day. People become so focused on proving who is right that they forget the relationship itself is losing. Ego replaces understanding, silence replaces communication, and two people who once felt like home start feeling emotionally unsafe around each other. One evening after another Saturday, the argument that turned into cold silence, she finally asked him a question that changed everything. She said, "When was the last time you really listened to me without trying to defend yourself?" He didn't answer immediately because deep down he knew she was right. He had been hearing her words but not her emotions. And she realized something too. She had spent so much time expecting him to read her pain without clearly expressing it. That conversation didn't magically fix everything, but it opened the door they had both unknowingly closed. For the first time in months, they stopped acting like enemies trying to win arguments and started acting like two wounded people trying to understand each other again. And that's what many couples never realize before ending things. Sometimes the problem is not the absence of love. Sometimes it's emotional exhaustion, unhealed stress, pride, and poor communication slowly suffocating the connection. But healing only works when both people are willing to take responsibility. Love cannot survive if one person keeps carrying all the emotional weight while the other stays emotionally unavailable. Real relationships require uncomfortable honesty. They require vulnerability. They require admitting, "I know you're hurting, and I haven't been showing up for you the way you needed." Not every relationship should be saved, and not every goodbye is wrong. Some people truly outgrow each other. Some relationships become toxic beyond repair. But many people leave relationships that still had love inside them simply because they never learned how to communicate pain properly. They confuse temporary emotional distance with permanent incompatibility. The hardest lesson she learned was that love alone is not enough to keep two people together. Love needs effort, attention, emotional safety, understanding, and most importantly, two people willing to grow instead of blame. Because when relationships fail, it's rarely because two people stop. Caring overnight. It's because they stop nurturing the connection while expecting it to survive on memories alone. Months later, she looked back at everything differently. She realized relationships are mirrors. They reveal your fears, insecurities, attachment wounds, and emotional habits. Sometimes heartbreak teaches you more about yourself than happiness ever could. It teaches you how important communication is, how dangerous silence can become, how self-worth should never disappear inside love, and how emotional connection must be protected before distance becomes irreversible. Because in the end, the saddest relationships are not the ones destroyed by hate, they are the ones destroyed by two people who still loved each other, but slowly stopped making each other feel loved. He used to believe that love meant staying no matter how much it hurt. To him, loyalty was measured by how much pain a person could tolerate without leaving. So every time she disappointed him, ignored his feelings or made him question his worth, he convinced himself that real love required patience. He told himself relationships were never easy, that everybody struggles, that nobody is perfect. And slowly, without realizing it, he began sacrificing pieces of himself just to keep the relationship alive. At first, the changes were small. He stopped bringing up things that bothered him because every conversation somehow turned into an argument. He stopped expressing his emotional needs because he was tired of feeling too sensitive. He became quieter, more careful with his words, more afraid of losing her than losing himself. That's what emotional attachment does. Sometimes it makes people hold on to love so tightly that they ignore the damage it's causing inside them. The strange thing was, he genuinely loved her. She wasn't evil. She wasn't heartless. She was simply emotionally distant in ways he kept trying to excuse. Some days she made him feel incredibly important, and those moments became addictive. A random sweet message, a soft apology, a night where she finally showed affection again. Those small moments kept him emotionally attached. They gave him hope that things would go back to how they used to be. But relationships built on inconsistency can confuse the heart. One day you feel deeply loved, and the next day you feel invisible. And when someone keeps giving you just enough attention to stay, but not enough consistency to feel secure, you begin living emotionally hungry. You start chasing small signs of care like they are proof that everything is okay. His friends noticed the change before he did. The version of him who used to laugh loudly and speak confidently slowly disappeared. He looked emotionally exhausted all the time. Even when he was with people, his mind stayed trapped inside the relationship. He constantly overthought everything. If she sounded cold on the phone, he blamed himself. If she pulled away emotionally, he worked harder to fix things. He became so focused on keeping her happy that he stopped asking himself whether he was happy at all. That's the dangerous part about attachment. It can make loneliness inside a relationship feel normal. It can make emotional neglect feel like something you simply have to survive in order to be loved. And over time, you stop recognizing your own needs because your entire emotional world begins revolving around another person's moods, attention, and validation. One night, after hours of waiting for a reply to a message she had clearly seen, he sat alone in his room replaying old memories in his head. The pictures, the late-night conversations, the promises about the future. He kept using the past to justify the pain of the present. He missed who she used to be, or maybe who he believed she was in the beginning. And that realization hurt him deeply because he finally understood something he had been avoiding for a long time. He was no longer fighting for a healthy relationship. He was fighting for the memory of one. Still, walking away felt impossible. People think leaving a painful relationship is easy once you realize you're unhappy. But emotional attachment doesn't disappear just because the relationship is unhealthy. Sometimes your heart stays attached to someone long after your mind sees the truth. That's why people go back. That's why they forgive things they said they never would. Because attachment creates emotional dependency, and dependency makes separation feel terrifying. But eventually, exhaustion changes people. There comes a moment when the pain of staying becomes heavier than the fear of leaving. For him, that moment came during a simple conversation. He was explaining how emotionally alone he had been feeling, and instead of trying to understand him, she laughed softly and said, "You think too much." That sentence broke something inside him, not because it was cruel, but because it confirmed everything he had been trying not to accept. The person he loved no longer cared enough to protect his emotional well-being. That night he didn't cry immediately. He just sat there quietly, staring at the ceiling, realizing how long he had abandoned himself while trying to save a relationship that only survived through his effort. And for the first time, he asked himself a question he should have asked much earlier. Why am I fighting so hard for someone who is comfortable losing me? Healing didn't happen quickly after the breakup. In fact, the loneliness became worse at first. He missed her constantly. He missed the routine, the memories, the hope that things could still change. Some nights he almost texted her just to feel connected again. But slowly, through the silence, he began rediscovering himself. He started noticing how peaceful life felt without constant emotional anxiety. He laughed more naturally again. He slept better. He stopped checking his phone every few minutes hoping for validation. Most importantly, he led. Orna, the difference between love and attachment. Love is mutual care, respect, consistency, and emotional safety. Attachment is fear of losing someone, even when losing yourself in the process. Real love should never force you to beg for attention, question your worth daily, or carry the entire relationship alone. And choosing yourself after giving everything to someone is not selfish, it is necessary. Months later, he understood that heartbreak was not just about losing another person. Sometimes heartbreak is grieving the version of yourself that accepted less than you deserved because you were afraid of being alone. But healing begins the moment you finally realize that loneliness can never be worse than constantly feeling unwanted by someone you would have done everything for. Because the most painful kind of heartbreak is not losing someone you love, it's losing yourself while trying to keep them.